I think we will have a very, very good session and very excited to hear this. So enjoy.
All right.
Hello, I'm Michael Stahnke, and I want to talk about hiring. So this started with us having an amazing year last year, trying to hire a whole bunch of engineers. We were going from about 120 up to about 250 engineers, and we learned a lot trying to do that. And so this is kind of going to be that story that I'll walk you through. So this is what we learned about hiring engineers after 6,000 technical interviews in 1 year. I'm Michael Stahnke. I'm Vice President of Engineering at CircleCI. So when I talk about hiring, what I really like to think about are how do we do this correctly and how do we make this just consistent across the board? And so when we work on things, we like to look at them as science experiments. So, okay, let's just start with the original problem. Well, the original problem is, as a business, we need to be able to make our engineers, or we need to be able to make our customers' dreams come true. And that's why we need more engineers. So let's go get some engineers. That's really the problem statement here. But when we start to do that, the idea that we really want to overcome is that interviewing is really difficult to do well. And I do believe this, and I've seen it for years. I love working on interviewing. I love working on hiring, but I still think that it's always something that can be improved upon. And even the companies that do it well sometimes still have mistakes and mess up, and ourselves included. So what makes interviewing difficult is kind of just the first thing you can stop to think about. And the challenges of interviewing are really just, are you getting the signal that you're looking for from your process? And then are you being fair and consistent throughout the whole thing? Bias to me is just a thing that's inherent to everything having to do with people and humans. And so I want to make sure that we try and work on that bias, acknowledge that bias, understand that bias, control for that bias throughout the entire process. I'd like to say that we remove it, but I just don't think that's possible. So instead, I'd rather us understand it, acknowledge it, and work with it. There's also things like, are you good at interviewing? Are you good at skills? Are you good at scheduling people and getting them through the process? And then just, compassion and empathy for what this candidate is going through. Interviewing is stressful. You're basically saying, I'm going to go be judged by people I probably don't know, where they can tell me if I'm good at the choices I've made in my life so that I can make a living. That's just a tall order to start with. So we want to make this as comfortable and problem-free as possible for our candidates, and make sure that we're going to be a good place for them to land, and they're going to be a good person to work on the things we need them to work on. So just to kind of start, in the early part of our process, it was kind of, hey, we have some baselines for what we're doing for interviewing. We have required engineer training for everything going on. And that means that we have a written, like self-paced, asynchronous thing that every engineer has to go through that talks about bias and talks about our philosophy of interviews, like they're not adversarial. We're not going to try and get you into the gotcha situation or the look, I know more than you situation, which we've probably all read about in technical interviews. This is a known stressful situation, and I really, really want to keep that in mind. There's a tweet here that looks like my head's covering, kind of, but it says, tonight I realized that my basic interview process model is be a decent big brother, and I might be okay with that. And that's Ryan. And Ryan is probably the single best interviewer I've ever worked with in my career. He does not work at CircleCI, but I did work with him at a past job. And he spent a whole bunch of his time working on interviews and making sure that they were excellent. And I learned a ton working with him on that. And so I've carried a lot of that forward. But basically the goal is, like, can you be a partner to the person interviewing versus can you be adversarial or kind of against them or judging them too harshly? It's how do you work together to solve problems and see if you can do that in a job-like situation. So after we had our problem statement, it was, okay, we have a lot of problems hiring people, or our hiring is not going how we want to. So let's do some science on this. Let's just run some hypothesis and validate them over time. We have enough data going through that we can probably do that. So we start with, we can improve our technical interviewing to improve our signal and consistency for engineering. That was our a hypothesis. And so how do we test it? Well, we started to look at modifications of our process, and we found lots of constraints that we really had to work through. Some of these constraints were kind of self-imposed. Some of them were more just things that we couldn't change, either because of company rules or governmental rules or whatever. And so we had to look at what were really the things that we could modify. The first thing was, our interview process took a long time. And, generally, the shorter your interview process, the more likely you are to successfully complete that interview loop with that candidate. For us, I think our average interview loop was taking 3.5 weeks. And turns out a lot of candidates have another job offer by the time you're done with that. And so why was that happening? Well, we'd schedule a screen. And then after they pass that, we'd schedule them to talk to the hiring manager. And after they pass that, we'd schedule them to do a take-home validation of technical, skills. And after they turn that back in, which could be a week or two, sometimes for people, we'd have to find somebody who could grade it appropriately because we let you do it in one of 7 different languages. And so, if the person that was grading it in Scala, or the couple people that could do Scala, weren't available, it could sit for a few days before we'd grade it and go through it. And so we'd just, and then we'd pass them on to the next part. Maybe it's a team interview after that, or an architectural exercise or whatever. And so this just meant weeks long. And generally, we lost a lot of candidates through that, unless they really wanted to come to CircleCI or they weren't really interviewing lots of other places, which, luckily for us was some of us and was some people, but it certainly wasn't at the volume that we were going for. And so our first goal was, can we just shorten this? And how would we do that? So we did shorten it. We moved our candidates through much faster. And part of this was we started scheduling in blocks. And so instead of having like 7 discrete steps, I moved it down to basically screens and then like technical validation and then completion. So it was kind of, 3 steps instead of 7. We definitely had a more consistent process. And so different teams inside of engineering, we decided to be like, we're all going to use the same steps instead of this hiring manager has this type of flow and another one has a different type of flow. Several common interviewers were used at a very high rate. That was one of the outcomes. And so like certain people that were really good at certain types of interviews were just interviewing a whole lot. And some people like that and some people don't. Some people like that a whole lot until they don't. And then at some point they just come to you and say, I'm burnt out on interviewing. And then you have a problem because you haven't ramped up somebody else. And then consistent results are still a challenge. And I mean, I'll probably get into this a little bit more later, but when I'm reading through scorecards and I'm left with questions sometimes. And so I'm saying, okay, we've improved here, but it's not great. So what else is going on? What else can we modify to improve getting more quality candidates into our engineering department? So the issues that remained were finding the right reviewers for the take-home exercise. Like I said, in that Scala example, we had like Scala, Clojure, Java, Python, Ruby. Might have had like Elixir or Erlang or something like that. I mean, like we just had some different languages people could pick from to do some of the work. The same folks were in heavy rotation to do a lot of the other parts of the interviews. Consistent grading of the take-home exercise. I found that the take-home exercise has many issues, and that's one, you can use many different languages, but the constraints of them are slightly different in different languages, and that wasn't on purpose. There was a bug, I think, in the Python version that was not present in the Java version, and so people get dinged for finding it or not finding it. Some people would grade you more on the quality of your commit messages, or did you write your tests before you wrote your code or after, or did you squash commits into clean, unique, discrete sets of changes? And it was just like, are we really grading what they can do, or are we, because this was a 2-hour exercise. I don't expect everybody to put forth their best work under a stressful situation in 2 hours, even this was a take home thing. And so one of the other problems with this kind of process was, how do we interview for areas with new expertise? And so for us, we were hiring out a data team for the first time, or we were hiring out, experts in security for the first time. And how do you hire for something that you don't already have in-house? How do you find expertise about it? That's kind of hard. And then bias was still there. Referrals definitely were getting through our loops way faster and with higher success rates than others. And so not said that we don't have a referral bias. I think most companies do, but I think we were looking at some of the other types of biases in there. Are we getting the appropriate, representation even in our interview panels? Or do we have it look like our interview process, like our engineering department does, or is it just the same, 6 or 8 people always interviewing? Do we have women? Do we have women of color? Do we have people of color? Do we have people that just have all sorts of different backgrounds showing up in our interview process? Because that's what we have in our department. And I wanted to be very representative of that and make people feel comfortable with that. And so those issues still remained. We had to do some work there. So I was at a CTO summit maybe a year and a half ago, and I had heard from another organization that was scaling their hiring. I think they had gone from 200 to 400 in a year. And they talked about this, how they sourced out a lot of their technical validation and interviewing out to some specialists that were just really, really good at it. And they had a lot of glowing things to say. And this company was called Carrot. There are other ones that do this. There are other places that you can source your technical interviewing to. So I'm not going to get too much into the specifics of Carrot, but we decided to look into this. And I thought, hey, this is fascinating. Let's check this out. So basically, our second big experiment was to move our technical screening to a third-party specialist. And so these people are trained on how to do technical interviews, technical vetting, and that was just going to open up a whole new world for us. So let's take a look at that. What I really was hoping that we were going to get was a reduced load on our own engineers doing technical vetting, consistent calibration of skills, meaning that these Carrot interviews are trained. They go through a lot of very specific training on how to ask questions, how to help people along. They're familiar they have more skill sets available. So if we wanted to get somebody on a data team or a data scientist, they have people that can interview specifically for that. And so we didn't, even if we didn't have those skills, they had those skills, which meant we could leverage that. It allowed people to take interviews at different times. If you want to do them in the evening or on weekends, that was all available versus, kind of daytime for wherever our interviewers are. Allows you to redo an interview. If the candidate was like, hey, I just didn't do a good job here, you could click redo and they'd schedule another one for a couple days later. And for us, we could watch recordings of all these interviews, which I really liked because we could watch really good interviewers do really good interviews. And that could make you better by understanding the way they ask questions, the way they probe candidates, or just even audit. They said this person was proceed to the next round as fast as possible. Why did they think that? Oh, well, let's watch the interview and see. But we did have some concerns up front with this too. I could say this was not met without, resistance and controversy, even within CircleCI. Candidates moving from CircleCI to a third-party process. And so it was kind of, you talk to one of our recruiters, you talk to one of our hiring managers, and they say, hey, you're going to go talk to this third party to see if you know what you're doing in a technical sense. Carrot or the third-party assessment places would not tell us the diversity of the interviewing pool. So we didn't really know, is it always going to be a bunch of white dudes interviewing everybody, or are there different people? From my experience, it definitely was not always white people, just white men doing all the interviews, but we couldn't get any data around what that was going to look like overall. And then do we have any input on the questions? Originally we thought we'd have a lot of input on the questions, specifically for a very, targeted types of roles. That was a concern. And then unable to sell the company during the interview. And I think this is one of the most kind of forgotten parts of interviewing is a good interview loop throughout the entire process. You're selling the experience and the company that you're trying to, bring candidates into. And that means that if somebody, doesn't pass the interview loop, maybe they leave and just think, wow, that was a great experience, or darn it, I really wish I could have worked there. That's the way that I want candidates to leave the interview experience. And so I want them thinking, I wish I could have worked at CircleCI. And, maybe if they can't, they'll tell their friends and be like, hey, I couldn't get in there, but maybe you can. Or maybe they apply again a year later after they've updated or refreshed their skills or learned some more things that were more in line with what the role we have, or maybe we open a role that's more in line with what their skill set is. That's not uncommon for us at all to interview somebody, a year after they didn't pass one time and hire them for a different role. But the point is, you want to be able to sell your company throughout that entire process, because if you're not selling throughout the entire process, you kind of lose some momentum. Like, you just want to always be selling throughout the entire thing. So what was the outcome of this, switching to a third party assessment tool? Well, our candidates moved in their flow. Candidates could work nights, weekends, schedule it whenever they wanted to. I loved that flexibility. There wasn't a take-home time where we had to wait for a candidate to say, okay, I'm going to do the take-home test, but it's going to be next Saturday, and you'll get it back Monday, or whatever, because there was a clear scheduling flow that we could see. We could kind of see this person's going to be interviewing on this date. They have this, and then they have 24 hours to click they want to redo if they really didn't like it. And then that'll happen. And the interviewers were really skilled. They were very good, and they were able to approach the interviews collaboratively. If somebody got stuck on something, they could kind of walk them there with a hint, or maybe something that would help them unlock that part of the interview without giving them the answer, or without being like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this person's even interviewing. They're terrible. There was a lot of empathy and a lot of good drive between these people and the third-party assessment and our candidates. And I was just very happy with the way a lot of that turned out.
Hi, we are Eficode, and we organize the DEVOPS Conference. DevOps is not a role. It's a way to increase an organization's ability to deliver applications and services faster with better quality. Some people say that DevOps is a management science. If Agile and DevOps are not yet part of your whole organization, we would love to have a chat and discuss how to make it real for you. You can find us at eficode.com. The links are in the description. And have a great time with the DevOps Conference talks.
But then we ran into a new thing that we started seeing, and that's scaling interviewing is difficult, even if it's your core business. A lot of the same problems that we were having at CircleCI, Carrot ended up having, or the third-party assessment tool ended up having. And that was that, we were trying to hire a whole bunch of people, and they were trying to hire a whole bunch of people to do more interviewing, and they had a bunch of customers, and they couldn't fulfill everything that we needed at the speed that we needed. And so it started to lag in scheduling closer to where we were before with our 3-week scheduling. We were getting 7, 8, 10 days out for technical scheduling. Somebody clicks a redo, it's another 48 hours. So we were starting to lose candidates basically because of that. But what really happened for that? Well, in the fiscal year where Carrot was the vast majority of what we were doing, we had 114 hired in that year. We interviewed more than 6,000 candidates at some point. So that could be like screening or made it all the way through the loop or wherever, but more than 6,000 interviews happened. 6,000 interviews, 2,600 candidates. And so, many candidates go through multiple interviews. On average, 22.2 hours per hire on interviews, which I didn't think was too bad, but there's some that go through and they're just the right candidate right away. And you kind of know it when you see the resume or you talk to them right away. And others, you might interview 30 people for a role and not find what you're looking for. So almost 6,000 hours of interviewing done from engineering, and then over 1,000 of those third-party technical assessments. So a lot was going on in the way that we were working with this third-party technical tool. And we were very successful with it for quite a while. But there were still some things that didn't go well that nagged at us. And as our hiring plan was kind of ramping down, we weren't having to hire at the same volume, it was time to revisit and reassess. And so what were the main problems here? Well, candidates didn't like moving from CircleCI into a third-party flow. They just felt like it was very jarring, and a lot of people were like, oh, you don't care about interviewing enough to do it yourself. And it's like, actually, I tried to think of it. We cared about it so much. We went to experts to do it, but not everybody saw it that way or believed it or got my explanations. They got it from different people. And people are very free to see things however they want as well. It's not like my opinion is totally correct. It was just the context I have, that was the viewpoint I had. But we had to watch all the third-party interviews to see if we agreed with the assessment. And so we ended up watching basically every interview that this third-party tool was doing, which meant that we were basically not saving any time because we were spending the same amount of time just in the recording, which I guess you can watch at double speed, or you can fast forward and find the parts you care about the most or whatever, which I did have great annotations about what timestamp did they ask this type of question and all this. Like, it was very sophisticated and very cool. Our ability to modify or change questions was a little bit difficult. And so if they didn't have a question set or an interview already created for a specific type of role, it was pretty difficult to get the assessment to work with that type of role. And so, we had some hybrid SRE type developer roles that were pretty developer heavy, and like trying to get that through was like, do you give them the developer interview? Do you give them more of the infrastructure DevOps type interview? And we needed a little bit of both, and it was just hard to combine. And then the availability of interviewers meant scheduling often didn't fit with our timeline. Like I said earlier, sometimes we were getting to the 7, 10, 12 days out. And so it just didn't work. And then some candidates would drop out as soon as they heard we were doing a third-party thing. And it wasn't many, but there was definitely a very small minority that was quite vocal and complained about it and would, put us on blast on Twitter or whatever. And so definitely some concerns there. And so it was kind of, all right, this worked for a while. Our hiring volume right now isn't as high. Let's regroup and see what our options are. And so we set up a third experiment. And this was, well, how can we do some technical assessments that are more real world instead of just the gotcha problems on a whiteboard? Let's invert a binary tree on a whiteboard, kind of classic, just stuff that you don't really have to do very often in your job. We started making a pair programming exercise. And so we got started with this third party. We decided to try something different. And so we just started to use pairing, and we wanted to really simulate working on a team, working with people. Can you get work done with others? Can we figure out the way you work? Can we, just work together, I guess, that's ultimately the question is, can I work with this person? Can I work together with this person? And so we still craft the questions and format. We use some of the things we learned with that third-party assessment tool. Actually, I'd say we used quite a bit of it to figure out what questions we want to ask early. Maybe we do a couple design questions, a couple system questions, and then jump into coding, maybe trying to solve a problem that's pretty specific to our space or somewhat specific to our space. And that gives us the ability to kind of own the interview process and iterate on it. So that was our third experiment. And this experiment is actually, I think, still ongoing. But we have less basic algorithm questions and more, this is the job type questions. And I think that was really important to us because, again, kind of those gotcha classic whiteboard problems just aren't that important for telling us what you know or can do for the engineering department we have. We have a lot more control over the questions and the candidate experience, which means that we can sell CircleCI through that experience as well, or talk about the great things and let them ask questions about the company during that section of the interview, which they couldn't do with a third-party assessment. We started quarterly retros to look back at kind of improvements and review all of our candidate feedback because we do send out assessments at the end of our process. And then the candidate gets full attention from CircleCI engineers. They're never, jarred back and forth with a third party. And then one of the main downsides is still that some engineers are just leaned on too heavily for these technical evaluations. It turns out certain engineers, I think in almost any department, get leaned on pretty heavily for engineering. That's just the reality of it. We're still trying to mitigate that. We still try and train new ones all the time. But I'm sure that if I was going to go ask my engineers, there would be a few that say, why am I always interviewing people? So did more engineers equate to more output? Yes, we were able to get more people working on our overall work. And so this meant, as we were hiring, if you go back to our original problem statement, it was we need more engineers to make our customers' dreams come true. One of the things you want to know is when you hire a bunch of people, did that actually work? And so I'm going to show you a little bit of our data internally that shows us how we were sure this worked. So there's a couple things here that I really want to point out. One is we were doing a bunch of hiring up until August of 2021. And this is when the hiring plan kind of changed over a little bit because we had hit most of our goals for first half, which we were trying to front load a bunch of hiring so that we could get the work done in the second half. This is when we started experimenting with our own pairing on, in August of 2021, where this green arrow is. And you can see, we have candidates interviewed, offers, hires per month. But then this is the one that the weekly deployments per engineer is the one that I really like to talk about. And that's how many deploys go through the system, which is some unit of completed work through the system per engineer per week. And so we usually hover around this 3.5 to 4.5 mark. And what that means is, when you hire, that number should stay the same or go up, but it might drop for a little bit because you're onboarding. But basically, if you're getting, call it 4 deploys per week per engineer, then the more engineers you have, the more deploys you have going through the system. And you can say, Mike, a deploy is not a deploy is not a deploy. And I can say, yeah, maybe. A deploy is a completed amount of work. Now, whether you have to roll it back or whether it worked or not is different. And you can always game it by making more and more deploys. But hey, if you want to do that, it means you're breaking your work into smaller and smaller chunks. So please go ahead and do that. That's all I've been asking engineers to do for years. So again, I love that metric as just kind of an overall productivity metric in aggregate. I will say I've never looked at weekly deployments per engineer at like a named engineer level ever. I just look at, we have 250 engineers. Here's how many deploys went through the system, do some simple math, and here's our weekly rates. I never want to see that one engineer does 2 deploys, another one does 12, because the one that does 2 may be spending all their time doing reference architecture documents and things like that, and the one that does 12 may have done 12 documentation fixes. Like, that's not the point. But the point is, over a law of large numbers, it will aggregate and tell you where the throughput is. And so we hired a bunch more engineers, and our aggregate throughput is about the same, which is great. Because if it's still around 3.5 to 4 deploys per person, but we have twice as many people, that means we have about twice as much work flowing through the system overall. So we made changes and the results were better. And not only that, our candidates told us the experience was better. And so if we talk to people that interviewed, 2 years ago versus 1 year ago versus today, generally people are much more happy with the system today and the interviews today. So, a couple comments here. We do send out a survey at the end of every person's interview, and we get feedback, and people really like the way that we've shifted to a pairing style and what's going on now. Some went through the third-party assessment as well, but we really just want to make sure that people have a great experience. These are humans. They have, emotions. They have feelings. I want to make sure that everybody has a great experience when they interview at CircleCI. And so if you're going to be a part of our interview process, whether it works or whether it doesn't, I just want you to leave with a positive experience. And I think that everybody at the company does as well. And that's one thing we're very aligned on. Interviews are not combat. And so let's just make sure that we treat people with respect and empathy. This is a very stressful situation. And so I hope you have learned a little bit about what CircleCI has done to modify interviewing processes, and learned while we did thousands and thousands of interviews and took data on them. I have a lot more data, a lot more charts, a lot more stories to tell, but unfortunately, a limited amount of time to tell it. So if you want to reach out to me, I'm at Stahnke on Twitter is probably the easiest way. You can find me on LinkedIn, whatever, ask questions. But I am more than happy to talk about hiring and interviewing and improvements in those spaces as much as anyone would like. So just thank you. And again, yeah, I'm Stahnke pretty much on any service on the internet if you want to find me. My name is Mike, and I'm at CircleCI. And thanks for tuning in and spending time with us.
Again, I hope everybody enjoyed the session. I at least had a few very good insights from the session.
I learned a few things as well, and I've been in this business since vacuum tubes practically. So
yeah.
But yeah, go ahead, Henry. What did you find there?
Yeah, one kind of a thing that struck my mind really well. I've been thinking the same, but I think Michael said it quite well. Was this when using the third party, they were unable to sell the company, and I think that is essential, because more and more nowadays, I think recruitment is actually, the interview is a two-way sales. So you need at the same time, then you are kind of trying to find whether the candidate is suitable for you, but more and more you need to be able to sell your organization, your work culture, everything, like what you do to the people you're interviewing, and more if they are experienced people. I think that's a very important part that you shouldn't ever underestimate. At least that's how I see it. What about you, Mark?
Yeah, absolutely. And like, I will kind of tie that to one of the earlier parts that he said, which is like, in my words, be a partner or a new friend with the person that you're interviewing, or actually on both sides of the table. And if you talk openly and honestly about the company, then you will talk about the things that you love about the company and the things that excite you about it. And you'll also let people know what the pain points might be, because you want to be honest about these things up front, because you don't want somebody to come in and then realize, okay, well, there might be triggers for some of their kind of behavior, because all organizations have different kind of dynamics and pros and cons. But yeah, I think making the person feel important, even if they are not selected today for this job, and giving them a really good impression of how your company kind of feels and operates, I think is one of the most important parts. And like what I often do in a lot of interviews, if I have 20 minutes with somebody and I can kind of tell in the beginning that maybe this isn't really going where they're going to be considered for this position, I often try to, ask them questions to help them figure out for themselves, where are they trying to go with their career if they're maybe in the wrong place here today. Because you might see them again down the road if they make some different kinds of choices, or get more experience, or maybe even just have a better day sometimes when they come in for the interview. Yeah,
definitely. And I do the same as you. I try to be very honest on what the job will actually be like, and even though we are selling, like let's not oversell, because like try to be honest and find out the way. I genuinely talk about why I like the job and what it is in for me, and I think that at least people have been kind of talking then afterwards, that's the way they either get like really the idea of what the whole thing is all about, or then they select something else. So I think it's not sales as such that you only try to paint the best possible scenarios, but also, hey, this is the reality of job, because none of the jobs are just the shiny parts. There's always something else on the that you need to do on the everyday job. So I think that's important to also kind of mention those parts. Anything else that came to your mind from that session?
I'll just say a couple of quick things. When you go in for an interview, want the job. you might have to find something for yourself, but you're there for a reason. And if it's just a paycheck, that can show as well. But you should know who you're talking to, know what the company does, whatever information you can find, and really want it. And if you really do, then I think others will see that, and it also gives you an advantage when you're going into the interview. And then finally, it's like how you feel in the interview might have something to do in the future with how you feel about the company. Because if they don't take very good care of you in the interview, that might be an indication. You never know, but just pay attention to the little signals like this and see.
Yeah, and then tying this up to the kind of a management and culture, I think, like said, culture lives in people, right? So the interviews and how do you actually select the people? That's how you build up the culture. At least partly, the culture changes with people. So I think that goes hand in hand.